Well, good morning, everybody. I wish I could be down there to do this, but I'm at home actually. So I got a kind of a short talk here. Um, Tuesday, I went to the. I was able to go to the discussion group. Corin brought up the topic of merit, and listening to people's responses to that. Which were nice. I thought, well, this kind of actually dovetails with that pretty closely, actually. So this is almost, at least part of it, kind of in a way, a continuation of that. So I wanted to start out just to get it started with a koan. I really like koans. So the one I picked out was case 65 in the Blue Cliff Record. A Hindu questions the Buddha. The case goes, a Hindu questioned the Buddha. I do not ask about the spoken. I do not ask about the unspoken. Buddha kept his peace. The Hindu said in praise, the world-honored one's great kindness and great compassion have parted the clouds of my confusion and enabled me to penetrate. After the Hindu had gone, Ananda asked Buddha, what did the Hindu realize that he said he had penetrated? Buddha said, like a good horse, he goes on seeing the shadow of the whip. So there's probably a lot you could say about that koan, but the part that grabbed me that I wanted to talk about was just Buddha kept his peace. Peace. What is that? Over the years of sitting, I've managed to accumulate a lot of Buddha statues. I got them all through the house and out back where I keep my bonsai trees. They're kind of here and there everywhere. My wife usually gets me one for Christmas, so I've got quite a pile of them actually. And I even pick up rocks that remind me of Buddhas, and I have those sitting around too. And usually I think I'm the only one that actually sees a Buddha in those rocks, but I have one that I thought was very, very good. And I put it by a pine tree, kind of by the back door, so you walk by it when you go in the house. And one time, just once, someone actually kind of recognized that and said, hey, that rock reminds me of something. I said, really? What? He said, looks like Yoda. So Yoda, Buddha, that's close in a way. Anyway, I got all these statues sitting around, and I think maybe it was a year ago or so, I said, why do I have so many? What do I like about these things? I mean, why? One should be enough, I would think, but something attracts me to them. And so what is that? And the answer I got was, they express peace. They express someone who's at peace. And I sit zazen, so that I can be at peace with my own life. And, sometimes I am, of course, sometimes for long periods. But the truth is, I find peace to be somewhat of a fleeting quality. Sometimes I'm at peace and sometimes I struggle to be at peace. So what is peace and why is it desirable? Well, it might be helpful to start with, what's the opposite of peace? I'd say the opposite of peace is conflict. Conflict can be, within ourselves or with others, people or situations. Conflict is when two or more entities struggle, each striving to subjugate the other one. Conflict implies duality. And I would say it's the basic state of all things that are alive is conflict. Conflict creates fear, fear of losing, fear maybe even of dying. But, in a world with finite resources available at any given time, conflict is pretty much inevitable. Living beings struggle with each other for food, water, sex, shelter, money, ideology. Conflict is such an integral part of life, it's almost like the paper we write our stories on. Human history is just a record of conflict. It's like an anthology of warfare, who conquered who and then who conquered them. It's how civilization and culture has progressed over centuries, and it has progressed. It really has. So then, you have to look at conflict and say, is it bad? If it's one of the basic conditions of life, why not just accept it? Why not even embrace it? And, there are cultures that have like a real kind of honor this warrior ethic or something like that. There are cultures that really do really almost idealize conflict. But, Buddha said his path, his teaching taught one thing and one thing only, and it was the path that leads to the end of suffering. Conflict causes enormous suffering, especially like mindless reactive conflict. And quite often that suffering is, most inflicted upon the innocent, children or just bystanders, people that aren't even really directly involved. So peace, peace would be the cure for that, the balm for all that suffering. But again, what's peace? Is it the absence of conflict, state of wholeness instead of duality? If it's just the absence of conflict, then is the way to peace avoiding conflict? If you could remove yourself from all conflict producing situations, which, all of us try to do to some extent, would that be good enough? Would that be real peace? If you could take a beach vacation for the rest of your life, would that be lasting peace? Would that be a good thing? But what if you can't remove yourself from conflict? That's the situation for most people. What if you're living in Gaza or Ukraine or, millions of other situations where you can't escape from conflict? How do you find peace then? Can you find peace then? One of the Buddha statues that I have is different from the rest. I got it at this garden center in the north end of Denver. I used to go there every time I went to the Zen Center. I'd go down there and get the components to make my bonsai soil. And they sold a lot of garden statues, of course, and they had this one. It's a standing Buddha. And I think I looked at this thing for like a year before I bought it. I didn't really understand it. For some reason, it kept bothering me, though. This is the statue. It's right here. Here's the little Buddha guy. He's got one hand up, one palm raised, and then one's down with the palm facing outward. So I didn't know what that was, but that's called the fearless pose. And there's a story about it, and that's what actually made me decide to buy the statue. I didn't really like it that much, but the story kind of was inspiring to me. And I was kind of going through a time where I felt I needed some inspiration to just to face some of the anxieties in my life, and the statue seemed to point in that direction. The story that goes with it's actually pretty well known, but it was new to me, and I really liked it. The story is, it was recorded by Nagarjuna in his Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra, which he wrote in the 2nd century. So the story is that Buddha's cousin Devadatta was jealous and envious of the Buddha and wanted to see him killed. He knew that Buddha would be visiting the city of Ragajra, where there was a rage-filled elephant named Nalagiri, who was known to be a killer of men. Devadatta bribed Nalagiri's keepers to get the elephant drunk and then release her when the Buddha was in town. Buddha went into the city to beg his food, and Nalagiri's keepers released her to kill the Buddha. And I imagine this in my mind like Showdown at the OK Corral, right? Buddha and Nalagiri face off. Buddha's at one end of the street, enraged elephants at the other end. In the story, it says the terrified residents of the city climbed to their rooftops to watch the showdown and gamble on who would be the winner. Just like in an old black and white Western. I think I've seen that scene with the people up on the roofs watching the gunfight, So the slap leather moment comes, the elephant charges the Buddha. But Buddha doesn't run. He doesn't avoid the conflict. He faces it, embraces it. He stands there, he raises his hand. He radiates peace. It says he penetrated the elephant with his loving kindness. And the elephant stops her charge and bows down to the Buddha. You know, it kind of reminds me of that college kid in Tiananmen Square that stopped the whole line of tanks by just standing there. I wonder if that was his inspiration, you know. We have two cats, two dogs. Cats are a female named Skitter and a male named Kenji. Skitter is really high strung and reactive, and she runs whenever she even sees the dog. So if they get the chance, they love to chase her. Kenji's got a little more of a Zen attitude, and he just ignores the dogs. Even if they run at him to chase him, he doesn't move. And they don't know what to do with that, so they leave him alone. I kind of wonder if that's a bit like the Buddha stopping the charging elephant. I like this story. I really like it for a couple reasons. First thing is, the Buddha doesn't avoid the conflict at all. He doesn't run away, or put on armor, or use distraction to put himself in a safe place. He stands fast. That's a great thing to be able to do, you know, to be unmoving. And even better, you know, the way he expresses peace has real power. It's not inert. It changes the world. And, you know, you could say the Buddha won this conflict, but the elephant didn't lose. He didn't hurt the elephant. In fact, the elephant won too. He removed her fear and anxiety. So it's really a win-win situation. I think growing up, I kind of learned that in the face of conflict, you know, being peaceful or peace was the right way to be, but it was also could be ineffective. You know, there's a lot of, you know, think how many country western songs or kung fu movies have where the guy keeps turning the other cheek, turning the other cheek, turning the other cheek, and it doesn't work. So finally, he turns to violence to solve the problem, right? Or like walk softly, carry a big stick. You know, that's kind of pervasive in our culture. And I mean, there's probably some. I mean, there's truth to that for sure. But you know, Buddha shows otherwise. You know, his peace is so deep and so powerful, it stops a charging elephant. And it's the same with the Hindu too. You know, the Buddha's peace, or as the Hindu says, his great kindness and great compassion moves the Hindu. It changes him. So the question is, how can we do that? Can we even do it? And this gets into what we were talking about last Tuesday. People talked about interacting with strangers and stuff that I thought kind of fit with this. But Zen teaches that each of us is a Buddha. But can we really act like a Buddha and change the world with our peace? If we can do that, that's real power. I mean, it's power the world needs. You know, or if we can't do it right now, can we learn to do it? Can we train ourselves? You know, how? Well, what came up to me when I asked myself that was, you know, before we can stop someone else's charging elephant, we have to recognize and learn to stop our own. In my own life and practice, trying to learn to be less reactive and more at peace with whatever situation I'm in has been a recurring theme. My stereotype of Buddhists is that we're all very calm, but I'm certainly not always calm. I wouldn't say I come from a calm family. I don't think we have a calm genetic makeup. So making friends with my elephant is a continual part of my practice. We all have an elephant, maybe even several. What triggers you? What makes you upset, irrational, angry, unkind? That's your elephant. We have to start by dealing with these things in ourselves first. And of course, that's what Zazen, the Great Heart Way, and our practice is for. Learning to tame elephants. First, we have to start to tame our own, and then maybe we can help others tame theirs. I chose this koan and this story because it seemed pertinent to my life right now. You know, there's so many disturbing things in the news and, you know, politically, culturally, internationally, environmentally. It seems like the population of angry elephants is going up dramatically and going to keep going up. And the world needs elephant tamers. The world needs Buddhas. That's us. So let's just keep sitting. Thank you.